Good luck.
Good luck. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today again for the 6th week of the SADC TFCA webinar series. Today, we speak about climate resilience and water security with several people in our region who are active independently or together with government and joint programs to make sure that when we talk about conservation, we also put it in a broader context of climate change adaptation. And for this reason, we have asked, and she kindly accepted today as the chair for the session, Sibongile Mavimbela from the SADC Secretariat. Sibongile, the session is yours. I would like to welcome you and thank you again for joining us today. And that's all for me for now from Clara. Thank you. Welcome to the session.
Alors, attends, on va voir si je suis en mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I lost connection for a moment. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear. Thank you, Sibo.
Okay. All right. My name is Bongile Mavimbela from the SADC Secretariat, and I am responsible for the Environment and Climate Change portfolio. And this is a session that's relevant to the work that we do because it talks of climate resilience and water as a natural resource. And TFCAs are also important areas in our region, and we totally rely on them for a resilience of communities, particularly in communities where we have wildlife and natural resources. So we are here to participate in this session. We've got a number of speakers, 3 speakers that will take us through what they do and how they contribute to this process. And our first speaker for today is Christy. I'll give you a bit of a background on Christy and on Christine. Christine is a biodiversity advisor for the USAID-funded Resilient Waters Program, which strives to build resilience in water security in Southern Africa.
Email, but I was not.
Can I ask other people to mute their mics, please? I can hear some voices on the background. So Christy heads the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services component of the program with the objectives to enhance the conservation of biodiversity while promoting private sector engagement. And she holds an MSc in Conservation Ecology, a PhD in Zoology, and 2 postdoctoral research fellowships from the University of Cape Town and University of Stellenbosch. Christy also has extensive experience working in the conservation land space, and her main research focus is on building resilience in social ecological systems, which include sustainable livelihood activities that support the coexistence of wildlife, biodiversity, rich habitat, and people. So there you go. Christy, over to you. Can you take us through your presentation for today? And you have 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sibongile. I'm just going to try and share my screen here. Okay, can you see my screen? Oh.
Christy, for me, it's not showing yet. It's
in the process, but not showing yet. Kirsty, you are frozen.
We lost
the connection.
Sorry, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now.
there. Okay, let me try to share the screen again without losing myself.
You can also put your video off if your bandwidth is low.
I think that's the issue. Okay. Okay, are we good to go?
Yeah, just put it on presentation, please, and then we're clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Clara, for inviting me to participate in this webinar series. So today I'll be speaking about how transfrontier conservation areas can be seen as catalysts for climate change adaptation. So as Sibongile mentioned, I'll be speaking through the lens of USAID Resilient Waters program. I'll just quickly start off explaining a little bit about the program, and then I'll dive a little bit deeply into the different activities to show that how we work in transfrontier conservation areas to address climate change resiliency. So the aim of the USAID Resilient Waters program is to really build resilient communities and ecosystems in Southern Africa, improve the management of transboundary natural resources, and increase people's access to safe drinking water and sanitation services. To achieve this objective, this program collaborates very closely with regional institutions, national governments, and communities to build more resilient institutions, develop more robust information systems, and promote practices that enhance sustainable natural resource management. So the approach of this program really focuses on these three main themes, focusing on people and institutions, biodiversity and ecosystems, and water. The main core implementation strategy is about working at these different interfaces. When you're looking at people and water, you're really trying to address water, sanitation, and hygiene issues. When you're looking at people and biodiversity, we need to focus on human-wildlife conflict. How do you support livelihoods, and how do you manage protected areas? And then the intersection between water and biodiversity is about transboundary management. So in this program, we try and emphasize a systems thinking approach, especially when you want to deal with these three climatic areas. And it's about building support and capacity around ecotourism to benefit communities inside and outside biodiverse ecosystems to ensure protection of these ecosystems and their services. So where do we work? This program is mostly focuses on two main river basins, the Limpopo River Basin and the Okavango River Basin, and also slightly touching upon the Puzi Pungwe Sabi Tri-Basin. As you can see, this is quite a regional program, and in Southern Africa, we extend over 7 different countries. And if we hope to achieve the aim of building resilient communities and ecosystems, this is really made possible with working in strong collaboration and partnership with our key consortium partners, which are the River Basin Organizations, Okacom and Limcom, and the Transfrontier Conservation Areas, the Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Park and the Greater Limpopo Transfrontier Park. And this really helps us address the question of how do you build resilient change resiliency? Climate change is a global problem, and we obviously, for us to be sustainable, you need to build resilience. And as the transboundary or transnational conservation areas, as they are defined, is about extending across different areas, extending across a transboundary scale, encompassing 2 or more protected areas. So in our program, we try and work at the transboundary level, and this is done by, I'll just provide 3 examples. We're working with trying to finalize the Kaza Okavango Fisheries Management Plan to establish a joint management system to enhance the conservation and sustainable use of the shared fish resources of the Okavango River. With climate change and an increase in droughts and increased pressure on natural resources, it is becoming more and more important to conserve fish stocks. And this can be done by establishing fish protected areas. Be governed. There. Glitch. But we're working in fishery. You still okay there?
Okay, continue, Christy.
I don't know what happened there. So when you're working at a transboundary level fisheries plan, You need to be working on the ground with the communities, establishing fish protected areas. But you also need to be working at a transboundary level, working with the Ministry of Angola, Botswana, and Namibia to try and harmonize policy. Because you have to work across these different scales to address such a big transboundary project. The same thing with in the Greater Limpopo, we're trying to establish a freshwater resources management strategy and to ensure that the communities within this park and the surrounding regions benefit and receive the water, which needs to be conserved at a higher level. Because water security is an issue, and even though the impacts are felt on the ground, it's really about working at a higher scale to ensure that you build these resilient communities and wildlife. Groundwater is very important, but so is as much as the surface water. So we're also trying to establish how do you protect these transboundary aquifers. We have a project in the Kwando Wildlife Dispersal Area to try and manage the groundwater development to improve water security for livelihoods and also address human-wildlife conflict. And then just one example on a terrestrial scale is that we're trying to promote basin-wide biodiversity and ecosystem monitoring by implementing a joint wildlife monitoring system. We standardized the method of collecting and monitoring wildlife within the national parks and the private sector to improve data management to help make informed decisions that mitigate threats to biodiversity related to climate change. So if we take a step down one level into like the country level, at the country level, we're able to kind of manage challenges and issues which you address in a smaller scale. So the protected areas, for example, play a very important role that we need to conserve if you're thinking about building resilience for the future. At a country level, we're trying to support the review and update of management plans for key protected areas in the
Kirsty, are you there?
Sound?
Kirsty? Kirsty, we lost sound. Can you hear us? Kirsty, we lost the sound entirely. Can you hear us? I think she's trying to solve the problem. Sorry, everybody, for this.
Yeah, I think she's frozen because even the slides are not moving. Should we give her a minute? And I can see there's a number of messages on the chat box. Good people, you can introduce yourselves on the chat box and interact and also exchange contacts. It's a platform that allows those interactions as well, while we still try to get Kirsty back on board.
Yeah, I think she's trying. May I also please remind everybody to keep yourselves muted unless you have a question or a comment, in which case please raise your hand and we'll mention your name when the question or comment time is coming, so to avoid also background noises for the presenters.
Yeah.
I don't think she's going to be able to continue.
Okay, maybe we should try and set up for the next presenter, who is Tarero, and we'll give her a chance if she gets back again. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me move on to Saruchero Tariro, who is our next speaker. Tariro is a water resource management specialist with interest in policy and governance. He has about 15 years experience working in the regional water sector in research, project management, and capacity building. His work has mainly focused on transboundary water governance and has worked in the region's majority transboundary water basins, including the Zambezi Basin, the Limpopo Basin, Okavango Basin, Ingomati, and Pungwe Save Buzi. Tariro has worked with the International Waters Management Institute, which is IMWI, affectionately known as IMWI, the World Bank, Water, and the Water Research Commission of South Africa, amongst other regional institutions. He's currently working for the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, where he's the coordinator for the water program for Eastern and Southern Africa. Tariro holds a BSc in Management, an MPhil in Integrated Water Resources Management, and an MSc in Environmental Studies. He has completed a postgraduate diploma in Water and Sanitation Development from the Institute of Water and Sanitation Development, and is currently studying a PhD in water governance. Tariro is a published author, reviewer, and is accredited academic journals accredited in academic journals, and has recently co-written a book on the Zambezi River Basin. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Tariro. Take it on, Tariro. You have about 20 minutes to go through your presentation.
Thanks, Bongila. Is my screen looking okay?
Yes, your screen is showing bright and beautiful.
Okay, thank you. Greetings, everyone across the regions. I am talking to you from a COVID hotspot in Pretoria. We're just about to hit the peak. So it's a pleasure to be talking to people outside my zone, or rather outside my front door, because that's how the way it's working at the moment. And please wish us luck in South Africa as the COVID situation kind of keeps shocking us around. But yeah, we're resilient, and I'm very happy to be participating in this. Thanks for the invitation. Like Sibongile says, I'm the coordinator of the water program for IUCN within Eastern and Southern Africa, and we work a lot within the water program in transboundary water governance. This in IUCN actually happens through a program that we call Bridge, which refers to building river dialogue for effective governance. So Bridge is a water governance initiative that is run from IUCN HQ in Switzerland and our environmental law center in Bonn, and it works in about 15 transboundary bases across the globe, including Africa. That is Southern, Eastern Africa, Western Africa, Asia, Latin America, Central America. So I would like to speak to you from experience from both within Bridge and my other experience in other areas, I mean in my previous assignments, about water governance or transboundary water governance and its relation to transfrontier conservation. I will not be speaking about Bridge, I will be speaking about water governance. So it's important that we are on the same scale on that. Okay, I'm trying to make my slides move here. Okay. Just to let you know, we normally come across some confusion around what IUCN is. There are people in the region, very key stakeholders, who sometimes perceive us as a donor. Others perceive us as an NGO. Please note that we are none of the above. So IUCN is a membership union. This membership cuts across states, academic institutions, NGOs, individuals, and so forth. And because of that, we are very uniquely positioned to be a neutral convener across many platforms, which is also the reason why we work very well with SADC across several programs, including land degradation, forest and landscapes, water, and transfrontier conservation. Our work is on conservation. So whether this is species, this is water, this is animals, you always find us there. So, okay, now allow me to now speak about water governance. When we talk about water governance, there's normally this mistake or misconception of equating water governance to water management. Water management deals with the decision, the planning and decision making within an allocated resource already. But when we're talking about water governance, we are actually talking about the decision making that happens at different scales when it comes to the ownership and use of water resources. So water is this common, is this common pool resource which is very, very distinctly characterized by rival consumption and difficulty of exclusion. Meaning, whatever you do on one part of the basin is a very direct impact on what happens on the other part of the basin. So when we are talking about transfrontier conservation, as you see in my next slides, we are now talking about water and other resources at the highest scale. So the governance begins at a very local scale, even if you are sharing just one stream, and goes all the way up to the sharing of a very big river like the Zambezi, where you have 8 countries there that shares the basin. So in governance, we're talking about the clarification of the roles and responsibilities. Whose roles? You have the government, you have the private sector, you have individuals, you have your direct resource users, be them industry, agriculture, municipalities, and so forth. So every key stakeholder has a role to play in governance, which is why, unlike management, governance is very inclusive. So it is a lot more about the formulation of institutions that incorporate all these users and make them participate in actually making decisions about the use of the water and using the water very sustainably. But the most important thing about governance is that the water institutions themselves really have to work for the governance to be effective. Otherwise, you will have a very interesting situation where you have a lot of nicely drawn up institutions on paper that do not do much in real life. So when we talk about now transboundary water governance, we are now moving the governance to a multinational scale. So remember, we're talking about policies and procedures, and this was happening at a local or national scale. Now, when you are sharing a water course, you have 2 or 3 or more than that in terms of member states that now have different governance institutions that now have to share one resource and make these institutions talk to each other in order to, equitably use the resource. So the goal of transboundary water governance is first and foremost equity. And by equity, we mean, each user or each stakeholder or each key stakeholder should have equitable access, or rather a fair access to the resource and its use and its benefits. And the second key goal at transboundary level is sustainability. While you're using the resource, we want to make sure that there is, the existence of the resource is not endangered by over exploitation. So how do we now make transboundary water governance work? We're talking about institutions now at a scaled up level. This is where we form your transboundary river basin organizations like you have with the Zambezi, you have Zamcom, in the Limpopo, you have Limcom, in the Orange Sengu, you have Orasicom, and so forth. So these institutions exist primarily to incorporate these different policies and are needed every time to support the equity and sustainability now of the shared water course. And at this point, I actually want to pose a question. In transfrontier conservation, what do you think is the most important, or rather the primary consideration or element that is needed for the conservation area to work? I don't want you to answer the question now. I just want you to ponder on it. I'm just asking you, is it the animals that are in the transfrontier conservation area? Is it the land where these animals are? Is it the trees? Is it the people who are actually managing the transfrontier conservation area? Just think about that, and I want us all to answer that question at the end. So, at a transboundary level, solutions water governance solutions kind of cut across a few elements, and I've just listed a few here. This is not exhaustive. Your decision making, the decision making elements that are needed, that incorporate this inclusion that you're talking about, compliance monitoring, dispute resolution, benefit sharing. It's important to understand benefit sharing because this is markedly different from sharing the resource itself. Why does this become important? Because in order to promote resilience, you cannot have a winner take all in a shared resource. Someone may be 2,000 kilometers away upstream. If they use the resource just to cater for their own needs, and I'll give the example of this, someone up in the Luangwa and someone way, way down in Mozambique. Whatever happens in Luangwa is going to have a very huge impact on what happens on the lower part of the basin. And there's one way of doing it. You can either share the water in terms of the water quantity, or you realize that you're not exactly always in a position to actually share the water because water doesn't always exist, even in terms of allocation in space and time. So you may allow a user in one part of the basin to use the water for a use that is more beneficial or that is more resilient on their part. And then someone on the other side of the basin does the same. For example, if it makes sense for the upstream country to actually use the water only for hydropower generation, and then for the downstream country or countries to use it for conservation or supporting transfrontier conservation, for example, then you're not talking about benefit sharing. What just happens from there now is how do we make use of the two uses? How does downstream country benefit from upstream use of hydropower, and how does upstream country benefit from the downstream use of conservation? So I hope that is understood very well. Now, in the key considerations for transfrontier conservation areas, I put here the Kaza. I'm just trying to show the areas where the Zambezi River basin and this vegetation there, and then you have the Kavango Zambezi. You can see that you are more or less talking about the same landscape, although there are some parts of the transfrontier conservation area that kind of overlap. Now, if you look, I hope you can see my case in Angola here, and then you come to somewhere down here after the Kariba Dam in Zimbabwe. You are talking about the same water course, different users in different times and space, and different uses at the end of the day. But how do we make sure that everyone gets the kind of water they require for their needs at the time they need it? This is water governance. So I put this map up here just to make, to jog your mind a bit and try to see that within the SADC region, really, we have this unique situation where we have, I think, about 15 transboundary rivers. Then now with the promotion of these transboundary conservation areas, there are a lot of overlaps, both in terms of the institutions that we use to manage the resources, and also in terms of the landscape, the particular landscape itself. If you go down to the Great Limpopo, there's also a lot of overlaps with the Limpopo River basin. So in the water sector, we have some regional water resources management frameworks like your SADC protocol on shared water resources, SADC water strategy, and all these are guided normally by the regional strategic action plans that are employed, I think, every 5 years. I do believe that in the transfrontier conservation area, we have something similar. So when we actually talk about transboundary water management and we're talking about transboundary transfrontier conservation areas, you can already see that these are actually founded on more or less the same basis or the same knowledge platforms, and that actually the governance of the tool more or less requires the same kind of thinking. The governance itself is more or less based on the same principles. And this is where now, I would actually now, want you to start answering that question in your head. Why is governance critical? Now, equitable distribution cannot be overemphasized. Now, I'll start giving you examples from the areas that we work in within the IUCN water program. We have a very interesting situation in the Pungwe Basin shared by Zimbabwe and Mozambique. The Pungwe River flows only for a few kilometers in Zimbabwe and for a very, very large expanse in Mozambique, where it is now used for a lot of things, including fisheries, agriculture, and so forth. In Zimbabwe, the Pungwe River is just on a steep slope and quickly flows into Mozambique. Now, when you talk about equitable distribution, how do we make that work? So one of the very interesting things that are coming up there in the work that we're doing, we're still working in there, I think, for the next 4 or 5 years, actually. The water use in Zimbabwe is mostly around hydropower, and in Mozambique, it's consumptive. So equitable distribution becomes one of the pillars of key water governance, of water governance at a transboundary scale. And the things that need to be paid attention to here is the capacity on both sides of the border. Who needs what to be able to use the water the way they need it? And weak institutions have always been a challenge. So this is one of the areas where you always need to invest. I believe you may find similar challenges in transfrontier conservation areas of making robust institutions that speak and respond to stakeholders. Why is governance critical? The second issue there is the efficiency in allocation and use. Where is water best used? So if I remember in my time working in the Wange National Park, we used to have professional hunters who come and say, we want to hunt the lion in the Zambezi, but for elephants, we want to go to Kasane in Mozambique because they have bigger tasks. So this is interesting. Now, within a transboundary water course, what then becomes important here is what is the water resource being used for? In the Ruvuma Basin, where we work shared by Mozambique and Tanzania, in Tanzania, there's a lot of agricultural and municipal water use as water services, but on the Mozambican side, it's still very pristine. So they actually want a lot of that water for conservation, and there's growing, mining industries that is beginning to require the water for mining purposes. Now, remember, water is an enabler. It's going to work. Governance is about not just accountability and transparency. It's also about development. You're talking about poverty reduction. You're talking about economic growth, and health and so forth. So this is one consideration that we see in the water sector that I think is equally applicable in the conservation sector. The dynamics may be slightly different, but you're seeing the same principles, that the resources to work specifically for the development of the people that are sharing them. Governance is also critical at the political scale, because now you're talking about the rights and opportunities for decision making, and we always have challenges here of the legitimacy of the processes. How acceptable are these to the key stakeholders, and do we have enough political support to make it work? In the water sector, it's important. I'll give you an example of the situation we had in Lake Malawi, Nyasa. It's a very important lake to Malawi. It's equally important in Mozambique and Tanzania, but in terms of the ecosystem services that are received in Malawi, the lake becomes a huge contributor in terms of activities, job creation, livelihoods, and so on, to the national well-being of the people in Malawi. So one of the approaches that we've been using there within our bridge toolkit, we have capacity building and water diplomacy toolkits that we use to allow stakeholders to have some fruitful discussions on arriving at certain benefit sharing mechanisms that will work for their case. But the example was just important to me on the political commitment, because in the beginning, when we went into the Lake Basin, we were very naive around this. I'm not ashamed of admitting this, because we always learn by doing. We were very naive, and we did not realize that although the lake is shared by 3 states, its importance is actually different. So in Mozambique, you can actually go and talk about the lake with the minister. In Malawi, the issue goes to the president's office. I just want you to let that sink in for a while. In Malawi, the issue goes to the president's office. Just to give you an example of how governance can be so inclusive and challenging at the same time. Lastly, the sustainable use. You know, we are living in an era of climate change, in an era of growing populations and multiplying consumer needs. So this brings us to a very challenging point, especially within this generation. How do we safeguard the availability of the resource going forward? How do we make it work? So this is one of the issues that governance should try to address. If we are water secure today, are we going to be water secure in the next 30 years? In the region, as we talk about the next 50 years, we are already looking at a lot of challenges in the Limpopo, looking at the challenges in the Zambezi. So that now brings me back to the question, what is the most important or the primary issue now in transfrontier conservation? You are going to say I'm very biased, but I'll let you know that you are not going to have the animals without the water. You're not going to have the trees without the water. You can have the people who are managing it, but they're not going to be managing the dead trees. So we are basically talking about water at the end of the day as an enabler. And as long as we talk about transfrontier conservation, I'm now speaking to Subongile now as the focal points in this platform. We cannot work on transfrontier conservation without working on water governance or on transboundary water governance. So within the region, as we go forward, I'll be very sad to see a project that is speaking only to transfrontier conservation and talking only about species. It's time we actually begin to bring this together, because as you can see, the governance is complementary and more or less is actually talking about the same resource. And the development of the region is very much tied to effective institutions that govern both at the regional scale and also at the national scale. I think this is where I am. Thank you for listening, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Tariro, for the very informative presentation. We have learned so much from you on equity and sustainability of water and the importance of water in the transfrontier conservation areas. Thank you so much. I will quickly move on to our next speaker, and then at the end, I will allow people to make interventions or raise their hands for questions. So our last speaker is my newly discovered homeboy, which in Siswati we call Mkaya. I don't know what in other languages Mkaya is, but my neighbor. Rod Defletter is an independent consultant and the owner of Poponyane Falls Ecolodge and Nature Reserve in Eswatini. Currently the Vice Chair of Eswatini UNESCO MAB Executive Board. In 1993, he joined the National Environment Commission in Mozambique as the Program Manager for the National Environment Management Plan. He worked for the World Bank as Environment and Natural Resource Operations Officer and as the Task Manager for the preparation and implementation of the Mozambique TFCA project, which commenced in 1996. What happened there? Okay, and then he helped initiate the Eco Lubombo program, ELP, and built the community-owned Mhlumeni Bush Camp in Eswatini. He also helped design Eswatini's National Renewable Energy Program and the Green Climate Fund project, which is entitled Improving Climate Resilience in the Kingdom of Eswatini through the integrated management of mountain ecosystems. Rod, over to you. Can you take us through your presentation for today? Thank you very much. You have 20 minutes only.
Okay, thanks for reminding me. And thank you for the introduction, Mkaya. It's very nice to meet you through Zoom. We never met here on our home turf. So I'm going to try to go through this quite quickly. Basically, my argument here is that there is quite a lot of funding available through the Green Climate Fund and other climate funds that can be made available to TFCAs. And in fact, just to turn it around a bit, climate funds can really be a catalyst for implementing and operationalizing TFCAs. So the view you have there, which Spongile will recognize is the Makonjwa range. They call it Drakensberg Makonjwa range. That's part of the Malolocha Songibelo TFCA and falls under the Lubombo TFCA. It's a very important watershed, not only for Eswatini, but for South Africa and Mozambique as well. Then I'm going to show you this slide, which you won't recognize, but that is an amalgamation of established TFCAs and emerging TFCAs, just to give you an idea of their size when superimposed over Europe. And that's a very large area, and it gives you really the understanding of how climate funds can be utilized, because there are so many different ecosystem services and opportunities that can help leverage climate funds. This is the map that you recognize more, and I'll just point to this tiny little area here, which is Eswatini and the Lubombo TFCA, and that's quite small, but as they say, small is beautiful. And this has high value in terms of its ecosystem services. So if we look at the map, you can see that this Makonjwa Drakensberg range has very high values in terms of water, and the rivers are not very clear here, but there's really a large amount of river systems coming in and then going through Eswatini down into Mozambique and into South Africa in Mpumalanga. So this is a very important watershed at a transboundary level. And we're looking at both the Makonjwa and the Lubombo because these feed into Maputo, which has had problems with water scarcity. So this shows you the communities which we will be dealing with in this project. So this is another view of the Makonjwa Mountains. High ecosystem service value, not only in terms of water, but very high biodiversity. Very interesting geology. It's part of a World Heritage Site on the South African side, and of course has terrific values for ecotourism. This is the Lomati River that comes, one of the rivers coming out of the Makonjwa, and very high quality water. Lomati, Malolocha River, Komati River, they're coming through this catchment, and the quality of the water is still very good. So the project is a 31.7 million USD through the GCF funding. I think the point here is that it's a small area, but it can leverage large amount of funding, although this is, by GCF standards, is considered to be a small project. Still, it's substantial for the Lubombo TFCA. And the objective is really to build Eswatini's resilience to climate change by adopting an integrated climate resilient management approach for mountain ecosystems. So this is consistent with the SADC climate change strategy, which says must be very cross-sectoral and really involve all the different sectors participating and accountable. That is the SADC vision. And this is what we are doing at the Eswatini level, is trying to develop that cross-sectoral integrated approach, which is also very consistent with the needs of the TFCA. So this will include ecosystem-based adaptation measures for communities, and as I said, multi-sectoral, that will develop different planning processes. So I won't go through all this, but we're looking at 3 different approaches: ecosystem-based adaptation, community-based adaptation, and the landscape approach. And we're integrating all these approaches in this project. And here's a comment. The project has been submitted to the GCF. It's been approved pending the feasibility study. And one of the comments back from them, I should highlight, saying the potential role of ecosystem services supported by biodiversity is an important and growing focus area for climate change adaptation planning and implementation in the context of sustainable development. So this is quite important for us from a TFCA perspective. I can hear someone playing around in the background there. Okay, so
please mute your mics, everybody. Thank you.
So this is, I think this is quite an important message that's come across here from GIZ, which looks at the need to integrate community-based adaptation, ecosystem adaptation, and landscape approach, and the reasons for doing that. I won't go into each one, but the conclusion of that report, which I've said at the bottom, is that what is thus needed are more positive examples of how to integrate, balance, and jointly manage these 3 approaches, and of how to enlarge rather small-scale approaches so that they potentially can evolve into landscape-level models. And this is exactly what we intend to do in this program, starting with local-level planning, and these local-level plans then become the plan for the total watershed. So again, this is the model that we're using, in which you'll see that ecosystem-based adaptation is at the heart. And when you do that, then you're addressing a number of other activities, and they're well integrated. So this is the kind of business case that's behind the project, which is a nature-based solution approach. And you can see here that the present status here is our watersheds are degrading. And as a result, the outcomes will be poor. We will lose these outcomes of products, carbon sequestration and water efficiency, which is existential threat for Eswatini, because our economy is based on irrigation, sugarcane mostly, and other forms of agriculture. So without water from those watersheds, there is very little future for this economy. So the idea is really to turn this around and restore the watersheds and ecosystems through nature-based solutions, so that you have these outcomes and you have marketable benefits. And we are looking at funding mechanisms which are quite innovative. So there are other co-benefits that come out, and obviously food security is a very important one. And the benefits to biodiversity. So these are multi sort of dimensional benefits that come out of this climate resilience program. Just to give you an idea of the Lubombo, this is looking Lubombo range down into Mozambique, and there are numerous streams and pools that go into the southern Mozambique area, which has a very interesting hydrology. There's a lot of underground water in southern Mozambique, and the relationship between the Lubombo catchment and southern Mozambique is not yet well understood. So that is the Lubombo facing to the east, and this is the western facing Lubombo, which is part of the Mlawula Nature Reserve. So important thing in a GCF project, really at the heart of it, and I'm just going into this GCF project because what you'll get from this is that it's actually not rocket science to develop a GCF project. And funding is available, and this may be one of our best opportunities for supporting TFCA activities. So the paradigm shift potential here is the transformative change, which is implementing an integrated approach. And that doesn't sound, it's not an earth-shattering approach. It's something that we all understand, but it's not happening. So it is transformative in the sense that most of the natural resource sectors in Eswatini and elsewhere still take a very silo approach. And I found that when I was working on a renewable energy program, and I got people in the same ministry, natural resources, water and energy, to sit in the same room and discuss about the nexus approach. And in fact, they had never sat in the same room and discussed how they could work together, which was quite an eye-opener. And that whole nexus thinking had not really been applied in any way. So that is transformative from an Eswatini point of view, and probably from the point of view of many other countries in the region. So some of the paradigm shifts is in the way that we will get innovative funding. We're using two mechanisms, which is the decentralized climate funds, which gives more ownership to communities in how the funding will be used and which measures will be implemented and funded. And also development impact bonds, which is a very flexible means of bringing in funding, which I can elaborate on a bit further. And this idea, which we introduced in this project, has been taken up by UN Environment, and they want to apply it further in a GCF program. And we have also introduced the concept under this TFCA value study of a custodian credit. So these interventions, one of the reasons why this was acceptable to the GCF, because they want things which can be scaled up and replicated. And these interventions could be scaled up through existing institutional structures of the TFCAs. So this is a transformational hierarchy approach, and we're looking at, rather than communities normally being at the bottom of the pyramid or the bottom of the pile, we're looking at putting them at the top and having we're looking at all these supporting and contributing to eco-business planning at community level. And eco-business planning is a combined form of enterprise development and ecosystem management, which will be funded through this project and through this integrated planning. So project activities, I won't go through them in detail, but you see here on this picture, this is Pequenos Lubombos Dam, which my Mozambican colleagues will recognize. And this is the Lubombo in Eswatini. So the relationship between the water of Maputo and the Lubombo is also, there is a relationship there which is not well understood, but we're taking a precautionary approach by putting in a system to protect the watersheds in the Lubombo. And I should mention that as part of this transformative approach, it was interesting when I discussed this in a workshop with my Eswatini colleagues. Some of them simply couldn't understand why we would be getting money for something that's going to benefit downstream users in Mozambique. And it was quite strongly expressed in this workshop. And we said that, well, this is the part of transformation that we need to do. We need to think downstream, whether it's in a different country or not, because this is the way the world is going. This is the way we need to think. And this is part of the transformation that this project will catalyze. So it will be a comprehensive management framework, which I've discussed, and administrative units will include local communities, and the geographical boundaries, which is the landscape, will be defined by the mountain ecosystems. And I should just mention, it's important here when doing a GCF project that it's consistent with the policies and conventions and international agreements that the country has signed on to. So as you see here, these are under the Framework Convention on Climate Change. The Eswatini communication laid out these needs, which the project will then address. And in this photograph, you'll see, again, this is the very important Maguga Dam down here. And this is the watershed, of course, for that dam. So these ecosystem-based adaptation interventions will increase water resources in the catchments to address drought, which of course is becoming a very serious problem. We've only had, I think, one good rainy season in the last 5 years. Negative impacts of rainfall events. And of course, on soil erosion and floods, that has a big impact too on carbon sequestration and the quality of the soil, which needs to be maintained. So there's an added benefit there in terms of values and the benefits of ecosystem goods and services to Eswatini communities. So I won't run through these components in detail, but again, it's fairly straightforward. And it's again to say that if a group of people in any country can really sit down and work out a good GCF project, it needs a lot of data, needs quite a bit of science, but that will be identified. And as long as it makes sense and it has a transformative quality, then you're really on a good path to getting this kind of funding. So one of the key things here is this integrated climate resilient planning, ecosystem management plans, which is a participatory community mapping process, which is at the heart of really of the whole project. And this is an interesting look at a comparison of habitat integrity just over 10 years. And this is a photograph taken in 2008 of part of the Mokonjwa catchment in Mvimbili. And this is all relatively intact habitat. And then 10 years later, you'll see all these green farms here are...
Rob, Mkaya, can I just say you've got 2 more minutes?
Okay, these are, thank you. These are Daha plantations. So this is actually happening all over the country, and it's destroying the habitat. So this is the reason why we need to address this quickly. Okay, so these components are looking at the finance mechanisms, which one is this development impact bonds, which is a very good way of getting funding. And this links to the custodian credit scheme, which we've raised for TFCAs, which has an implication for all the TFCAs. And decentralized climate funds, which is for communities much better. And the third component was the knowledge management, which of course is key. That includes monitoring and evaluation and so on. So this brings us back to this and looking at the amount of resources and lands and ecosystem services that we have under TFCAs that can leverage climate funds. Okay, sorry I ran through that a bit quickly, but if you need some more clarification, I'm very happy to give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mkaya. That's awesome. It's beautiful. We are totally excited about the project, and as you may have seen in the charts, it would be nice to share with other areas and make sure we duplicate some of those awesome things that you are doing up in Poponyane area. And also the pictures that you presented to us, I think that's a classic example of good biodiversity being managed in a proper way, and an integrated approach to water, to the nexus approach, and that's very, very exciting. Can I go back to Christy and give her 5 to 10 minutes to finish off her slides if she is back on the platform? And then we can have a discussion, and you can start also posting questions on the chat room so that our presenters will be digesting them and preparing to answer your questions. Thank you. Christy.
Thank you, Sibongile. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry about the technical glitches here. So I'll just try and wrap this up quickly. Can you just go back one more slide, please? Yes, okay, that's perfect. So I spoke about how we work at a transboundary level, and I spoke about how we work at a country level. So I'll just kind of wrap up speaking about how we work at a regional level, because there are quite differences in between these different levels. So at the moment, we're trying to develop a master plan for Masinja Dam in Mozambique to address the broader needs of the surrounding towns, communities, and users, as well as the custodians of the dam, and help develop different facilities around the dam. So in conjunction with the zonation plan, this is also linked to developing different livelihood strategies around the dam. And this project will also kind of extend all the way down to Shai in Mozambique, where we have another project on sanitation. So this is an example of how you can work at a regional scale to address community issues on the ground, but also trying to help build water security in the region. And then that little picture on the side there is about the Waterberg Biosphere Reserve. So conserving water towers is obviously very important in the face of climate change. So we're helping develop a strategic environment management plan, which will be supporting the Waterberg Biosphere Reserve to encourage an ecosystem approach, which kind of feeds in quite nicely to what Rod was speaking about. And also explore different sustainable land use management options to increase people's access to potable water, and also help develop policies and strategies to allow natural resources to be used more sustainably, and thereby improving mitigation. Okay, next slide, please. And then if we come down to the ground, onto the local level. So the issues that we face at the local level is really about addressing food security, human-wildlife conflict, crop raiding, poaching, lack of water, and sanitation services. So through our various grants programs, we try and work with communities and NGOs on the ground to try and address these issues. Just some of the examples I've listed below is like about establishing climate smart backyard farming to support wildlife corridor protection. It's about promoting elephant aware and climate smart farming to improve farmers' resilience to crop raiding, removing alien invasive species in high water catchment areas to improve water security, restoring key ecosystems such as mangroves to improve water filtrations, and then to improve people's access to water. It's about building pit latrines and tippy taps to help prevent people from going down to the river, so therefore to reduce human-wildlife conflict, and also improve their sanitation, as well as developing rural water infrastructure. Next slide, please. So summing this up is really just kind of showing how TFCAs are really useful, because it provides you an holistic approach to building resilient communities and ecosystems, as you can work across these different scales. So the issues and the challenges are very different depending on which scale you're working on. So you need to have a concrete understanding of the context you're working with, whether you're addressing household issues or transboundary issues. Because the transboundary scale is really about the broader issues. And a TFCA is useful when trying to manage migratory species or working with international policies related to climate change. And then at a national scale, you can really analyze the parks and the current challenges and states, and then develop recommendations to improve the adaptive management of the habitats in these parks in a changing landscape. Then at a regional scale, It's about developing zonation plans or climate adaptation plans for a certain region. And then at a local scale, is about addressing those issues on the ground. And it's about how do you build resilient communities? How do you enhance conservation-based income-generating activities? So TFCAs therefore provides this multi-pronged approach with dealing with different issues. I think my second last slide, it's really saying that even though the issues and challenges may be scale or context specific, there's sometimes a feedback or an impact where how you deal with at one scale may extend upwards to the next scale or below. So we also need to understand that we need to be aware of these different feedbacks, and therefore it also requires multiple stakeholders at these different scales. And then I think last slide, just wrapping up, is just highlighting the fact that when managing TFCAs, especially in the face of climate change, sorry, one more slide before that, it's about not only looking at the social and ecological components, but it's the intertwinedness, it's the intersectionality between the social and ecological. It's about the production of ecosystem services, and it's about developing management practices that addresses climate change. So in conclusion, it's just saying, if we look at the main aim of TFCAs, which is about improving biodiversity and socioeconomic development, it's really about developing spatial resilience on the ground, which is about location, connectivity, and context, and then also being aware of what scale you're working at. And that's why I think TFCAs really provides a great entry point for start addressing climate change as it does all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you. And it's good that we did not lose out on that last part, which is very, very important. And we appreciate you being able to come back to us again and completing the presentation. I will ask if there are any questions from the floor. You can raise your hand through the raising hand system on the platform, and I'll ask my co-hosts Clara and Lisa to help me identify hands. I'm not seeing any hands yet, but if people have questions, okay, I see Eddie Riddell. We can take your question. Eddie, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Eddie Riddell here from South African National Parks. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, Eddie.
So
thanks.
So it's just a comment, really. So I appreciate the presentations from the three presenters. They've been really informative and insightful. I think the one thing I would just like to share as an additional thought, perhaps, is how we integrate this into water resources planning. And obviously, these large TFCAs align themselves pretty well with the sort of larger basin, transboundary basin planning. And it's sort of early on in that kind of thinking. But I think given the climate change, climate mitigation potential we're all seeing in these TFCAs, is to make a little bit more effort that we can bring in this to sort of regional or local level water resources planning. Just from our experience, I don't think the value of these TFCAs has been borne out sufficiently when we're talking about water resource management at the local level. So it's maybe just a suggestion about how we start to think about that and make sure that the thinking around TFCAs is mainstreamed a little bit more rapidly into water resources planning. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eddie, for raising that very important aspect. I'm sure our member states that are represented here and people who are managing the TFCAs and those of us at SADC level are taking that recommendation and will make sure it features into our planning systems. Steve Collins, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Timogile, Rod, and thank you, Eddie, for that question you're raising. I would encourage you to attend the deep dive session on Thursday, because we're going to be looking in depth at that. We're going to be having people from Tracy from the from Okocom and Nyambe from CASA talking about that integration that's required. Rod, I want to ask you a question. In terms of the timing of the project, how long has it taken to prepare to get to this stage? And then how long is this funding going on for? If you could just explain that. Thanks very much.
Steve, I can't remember anything before COVID. My mind, it's just a blank. It seems like a very long time.
It came out with your beard.
Okay, no, it's a couple of years. It's quite a long process. I think, you know, because they want to go through this, bringing all the stakeholders together, and then the GCF process is you get all the stakeholders together and they start to develop their own GCF proposals, and then you try to integrate them, and then it becomes a bit of a Christmas tree, and then they find that that doesn't quite work, and they tend to narrow it down to like this integrated mountain ecosystem. So I think you can count on about 3 years, but I think when you know the process, you can speed it up a bit, and a lot of it depends on the data that's available, and that's why we need to work a lot more with climate change people to start to identify the data that's needed beforehand, rather than, you know, you prepare the project and then you find that you've got to go chasing after data, which then certainly delays things. Just one point I'd like to make is that I think we have an opportunity to develop a TFCA-wide GCF program based on the values study that we're doing. And obviously there are all these values: soil, you know, just carbon sequestration of the soil, water, all these different ecosystem services. If we value them and put them together, we can, and look at their values in terms of climate resilience, both from mitigation and adaptation sides. We could develop a broader TFCA-wide program that could look at what they call a large-scale program of around 500 million US, and I think that's where we should be heading, and not take too long over organizing that, because obviously that's going to take 3 to 4 years to put together.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rod. I totally agree with that approach, because it covers a whole lot of ground. It doesn't focus on on small pockets of areas. That integrated approach covers a lot of ground, and the GCF likes large-scale projects compared to small pockets of projects here and there. It has more effectiveness, so we should look into that. And luckily, from the SADC Secretariat point of view, that sits within my unit, so we can have a further conversation after this. Thank you very much.
Right.
Is there any other person? I can't see any other hand. Are people very happy and content? No questions, no comments? We still have a few more minutes to go. And I saw on the chat platform, you can check there, Lisa posted the links where we can access the presentations on the TFCA forum. And I believe most of us here are members of the TFCA network. Yeah, if there's no more hands, thank you so much. I will hand this part of the session back to Clara to tell us how we should move on from here. Clara, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sibu. And thank you to all of the presenters. I'm really sorry that we had that initial glitch with Kirsty, but that we were able to sort of go back to it and complete the presentation on the Resilient Waters program. I hope that people are content and happy with the presentations and the discussions. I think, if I may abuse my position now that you've given me the microphone, what I find very interesting of all these presentations that we put together for today is the idea that moving forward, if we want to talk about transfrontier conservation, we have to move out of the frame of mind that conservation is just for species, but is looking at ecosystems and is looking at creating the enabling environment as a pan in a way, but the enabling environment to make sure that the ecosystems works. And if the ecosystem works, the assumption that we may be able to test in a few years' time if we go this route is that all life can be sustained. So this is probably a road that is new in terms of implementation, but in philosophy is a road that we've known many years, all of us in the environment sector. So thank you for all the presentations. And like Steve said, I would encourage you, if you're interested in this theme, to also join us on Thursday. Thursday is our day for the deep learnings, which start at 1:30 for 1 hour. So 1:30 to 2:30 Central African time, Harare, Pretoria time, as we say. And in this session, which is organized by Steve in the Resilient Waters Program, we will discuss specifically issues around the Okavango Delta, but using that more or less as a case study to understand what does it mean, how does everything change when you focus on water and when you focus on good quality water system, and what happens when you don't, and the way forward for Southern Africa. Oh yes, Steve, thank you for telling me that. We have an extra half an hour because we also have a video to show you that has been done by a new recent National Geographic project that has been funded on the Okavango system. So we hope to see you all on Thursday. As usual, you have to register by going on the link on the SADC TFCA portal. And also by way of reminder that all of our sessions have been recorded, and all of the recordings and the presentations are available on the SADC TFCA portal. You have to go into past events, select the events that you are looking for, and then you'll find the link to the recording and the presentations. If you're just interested in the recordings, you can also go onto the SADC TFCA program Facebook page, and they're all stored there. Same on the YouTube SADC TFCA network channel, where we store all of the recordings as well. So that's for easy interaction. If you are an education agency, or you really want to find out how to give a short but very well, maybe not so short, but definitely intensive course on TFCAs and in Southern Africa, we have partnered with a program of the UNDP, which is the Learning for Nature platform. And they have put all of the recordings and all of the presentations onto that system. And it's nicely packaged as a training. So as an institution, whether you know, an agency managing conservation areas, whatever, it's nicely packaged as a course, and it's available for free to anybody. So you just need to register for free into the platform, and then that will become accessible to you. I'm sorry, I see a question from Michael Wright. Michael, you can unmute yourself because I don't understand who is that question directed to, perhaps Rod, but unmute yourself and ask it, perhaps. Thank you, Michael.
Hi. Yeah, essentially, maybe Rod could answer the question. The value in terms of the climate mitigation and adaptation, the value to the water, resource protection and whatnot, is there an economic quantification of it that both Eswatini and potentially Mozambique could understand that maybe is an incentive for them to place emphasis on the project? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Rod, can you address that? And maybe also Tariro, if you have done any water evaluation studies in the region after Rod. Thank you. Rod, I'll unmute.
Yeah, thanks. It was raised by the GCF that we should use some form of ecosystem accounting for water, and I've just been doing a bit of research, and I see that just reading here that the application of these concepts for water resource management has been hampered by the lack of practical definitions and methodologies. So there is some new literature coming out on how to economically evaluate assessing water ecosystem services for water resource management. So it looks like it's still quite a new field, and I think that we'll just have to look at what's been done and see how it can be applied.
Thank you, Rod. Tariro, have you at the IUCN Global Water Program done any economic assessment of water goods and services, really?
It has happened, but not in this region per se. Like Rod says, it is quite a new area, and to actually get the methods correct and the correct people to be participating in it is quite difficult in this region. We actually attempted to do it 2 years ago, and we shelved it, and we'll be attempting to do it again in 2021. Our chosen basin to do that initially through what we call the Wise Up project was in East Africa, then didn't work, but now we believe we might do it in the Pungwe area, but I don't want to preempt much now. I would rather, after we try and it works, then I'll share that, so that it gives me an opportunity to now brag and say we've done it. But so far, well, it's a little new area, and the water users themselves will take a lot of time to warm up to it. Although it's a very important tool, especially when you are considering transboundary water use. Because if you want to get to a stage where water users are really account, or rather, I mean, you have a user pays principle kind of setup. It needs an enabling environment, both at the local and national scale, which don't exist much in the region.
Thank you very much, Trira. I see there is an intervention from Francisca as well on the work done by CapNet and WaterNet in South Africa and in the SADC region. But this is more training, Francisca. Am I reading you correctly? Francisca, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, hello.
Hi.
No, this is not only training, it's also research and manuals, lots of good manuals.
Okay. Can you perhaps share a link on the group that you have there?
Sure,
We have
yes.
Thank
yes.
you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I forgot. Karen, you're also here. Karen from IMWI. Have you done any work on the economics of water systems? And then, Kevin, I'll give you the word.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, Clara, for pitching this to me. Yeah, we have done some work on like hydroeconomic modeling, which will give you characteristics of basin, at the basin scale. You'll get some information on, the value that is coming out of different water allocations and so on. I think that's maybe the closest that I can bring into the picture. We've also lately been looking at, costs and benefits of some nature-based solutions, especially managed aquifer recharge, and how you can, invest in these options for relatively few resources, but get quite a high cost, return on investment. And so that's something that I've been looking at in particular. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Karen. Karen is also going to join the team on Thursday, the team of experts that are going to talk about this in more depth. Kevin Zucknell, you had your hand up. You are welcome to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Clara. And thanks for the session this afternoon. It's been very interesting. We did some work under the Maluti-Drakensberg Transfrontier project some years ago, where we managed to quantify the value of water coming out of the Utugela and the Umzimvubu River catchments. And that work also then evolved through a number of steps, which led to what we called an investment plan, investment into ecological infrastructure for securing ecosystem goods and services related to watershed management for the Umgeni River catchment here in KwaZulu-Natal. And that work was done in partnership between the South African National Biodiversity Institute and the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So if anyone's interested in obtaining reports coming out of that work, they're welcome to give me a call.
Thank you. Thank you for the availability. I think emails might be better, lest you're going to be kept on the phone for several hours on end. Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. I don't see any other points coming up except from Chiza. A good sort of thank you for the presenters and the moderators. He says the presentations were great and personally feel refreshed on how we ought to view the TFCA's functions, management issues, and benefits. Thank you very much, Chiza. Chiza, for those of you who may not have followed and don't remember, participated in the LEAP session because he works in the SADC and GIZ program on the LEAP strategy. So That's his main focus of attention. Right, I think if there are no more questions. Oh, and Patience, you had a question on, you wanted to retrieve a copy of the Cummings paper from Kirsty. So Kirsty, I think I'll put you in touch with Patience so you can share a copy of Cummings that was coming out of your last slide for Patience reference.
Yes.
Patience. Patience.
Anyway, I can intervene. I just sent that. I just emailed it to Patience.
She has been in touch with me.
Patience, it's not working. Patience, sorry, I've muted you because it wasn't working. It was really not working. It sounded very bizarre. But you can put a message in the chat box. Thank you. And okay, and I think Kirsty said that she's already emailed it to you, so that's great. Yeah, thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry, that was my disturbance. I will see you all on Thursday, 1:30 for deep learning on water, organized by the Resilient Water Program. Let me thank you again for attending. Let me thanks again to Bongile for kindly chairing this session, and thank you for your time, and for all the presenters. And I hope that this session was useful, and please keep in touch with those that you have most valuable to your interest and to your work. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. You can all unmute yourself and video yourself and wave goodbye and say thank you to the presenters if you want to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, colleagues.
Thanks.
Talk again soon.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you also.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good
Thanks,
to see you again.
Michael.
Look
Nice
forward
to
to the
put a
next
face
one.
to the nice to put a face to the voice.
Take care.
Donald, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Close the meeting now. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.